Guys and girls, so today I'm going to show you the basic process of how to put the eyelets and on the bottom of your car, your dragster, your air-powered dragster that is, and put the wheels and axles and everything, all the goodies on this thing and get it fully assembled and ready to roll. So in the next few steps I'm going to take you through the entire process of getting all that stuff hashed out and taken care of, so please follow along, and if you have any questions, feel free to let me know and I'll be more than happy to help you. So here we go. So the first initial step that we need to do is grab a bag of parts from the parts bin. Take a Sharpie, put your name on it. That way you know who it belongs to, and in case that you're in the middle of working on call for cleanup and you can't exactly get all your parts and pieces on your car just yet, you know who it belongs to a little bit later. Alright? So, after you put your name on it, what I want you to do is just do a quick inventory of what's in your bag altogether. So open it up. And as soon as you open up, be very careful. There's a lot of parts and pieces in here, a lot of small ones too. So open it up, dump everything out right on the table. You should have 2 rear wheels, so 2 drag slicks, 2 front wheels, which are a little bit skinnier. You also need to have 2 of these straws, which I like to call axle sleeves. We'll learn about them just a little bit later. You'll need 2 steel axles, these guys right here, 4 brass washers, they're yellow, and 2 little silver eyelets. Be careful, these little tiny pieces like to run away from you, so make sure you pay attention and know where they're at all times. So first thing we need to do is put these little eyelets, these little guys here, so if you can see that right there, little eyelets, put them on the bottom of the car. Before we do that though, we can't just place them at any random spot. We need to know exactly where to place them. So we need to draw a center line straight down the center of our car and figure out exactly where we need to place these things. So it's very easy and very quick. So first, in order to find the center of our car, we need to measure it. So I'm going to take a ruler, or you can use the tape measure, measure it out. So our piece of wood here, the width of our car, is 3/4 of an inch thick. So we need to find half of that, which would make our halfway point. So just some quick math that I want to show you on my paper here. Let me grab a Sharpie and show you what I mean. Alright, so our first number is 3/4 of an inch, right? Just like that. 3/4. So we need to find half of 3/4. The easiest way to do that, I have a quick, easy trick to show you how to find half of any fraction. I learned this actually when I was in metal shop in high school. My teacher showed me how to do this. It's a really cool trick. Makes things a lot easier. So if you want to turn that into half of this fraction, what you do is you keep the top number. Top number stays as is. Just carry that over to the fraction that you want to get to. And then the bottom number, it's very easy and very simple. All you need to do is multiply that bottom number by 2. So by some simple math, 4 times 2 equals, hopefully you said 8. So right there is our magic number, 3/8 of an inch. That is the halfway point of our car. So let's put that off to the side, keep that in mind, 3/8 of an inch, that's important to know. So find our car, our ruler, and you'll probably need a Sharpie. On most of these rulers, they are marked off in gradients. So we have, if you see in these little corners here, there's 8ths, 16ths. On the other side, we have 64ths and 32nds. We're going to be focusing on the one that says 8ths, which means that each section of an inch has 8 different marks. There's 8/8 in 1 inch. So, with that in mind, we need to draw a straight line, a center line down the center of our car. Line up the edge of the ruler with the edge of your car. And remember, what's that number that we talked about earlier, that we found the half of, 3/4 of an inch? Yeah, 3/8. So make a small tick mark at the front of the car at 3/8. Do the same at the rear. Just like that. Tick mark at the front and the rear. After that, this part's a little bit tricky. You might have to maybe hold it in one of my vices at the ends of the tables. Preferably the ones that have wood in them, not the metal ones. Or you might have to have a partner. This part's kind of tricky. Hold it nice and steady. Line up those 2 marks that we made earlier at 3/8 of an inch, one at the front, one at the back. Then we're going to strike a line straight down the center of the bottom of our car. Just like that. Sometimes you'll realize that your car isn't perfectly symmetrical, but as long as you took those measurements correctly, everything should look exactly like how you see it here. We have perfectly straight lines straight down the center. Alright, next thing we need to do is figure out where exactly we want these eyelets to go. So usually what I like to say is the eyelets, the job of these little guys is to hold the thing on the track and so it goes straight down the track every single time. If the eyelets aren't there, it'd go down the track, and once it gets about quartered of the way down the track or halfway down, it doesn't really have any control anymore. It starts to spin out or do any circles or crash. So it's basically our guidance system, because I'll have it set up so on the track, a piece of fishing line goes from the beginning of the track to the back, and we thread one piece of the fishing line through the front eyelet and the rear eyelet, and it's kind of like a rail system. Anyway, that's besides the point. So we need to have one on either side, and usually the further apart that they are, the more stable that your car is. If they're close together, your car becomes really wobbly. The only area that I'll tell you to stay away from, besides the very end of each, the front and the back, is these axle holes. If you go directly over the axle holes, what happens is the threaded part of the eyelet is long enough that it'll thread into the axle hole and actually jam the axle and stop it from moving. So make sure when you're making a mark, I don't care where you put it, just make sure it's not directly over top of the axle hole. So I'm going to put mine right here, right across, and one at the rear, about right there. So we have a line at the front and the back, just like that, where my two fingertips come. All right, once that's marked out, that was pretty much the hard part. What we have to do is take this guy here, which is known as the scratch awl. It's meant for scratching straight lines in metal or wood, or even marking where we drill. So what we're going to do is make a small little dent where that little X formed. So hit it once with your hand, a nice firm tap. Don't hit it too hard or else you'll make it too deep. Same thing on the other side. Nice firm tap. This part's really frustrating for some people and tricky, trying to get these little suckers threaded into the piece of wood. So they're small, they're not really too easy to put in. There's no easy way around it, honestly. All you can really do is push it into the wood and turn. You really have to grip it tight and pinch your fingers. And once you get it threaded in, for the most part, it's pretty easy. You can try to use a pair of pliers, that's fine, but it's just up to what you prefer. Try to make sure it goes in nice and straight, not crooked. Just like that. Once you do the front, switch around and do the rear. Same exact process. Push it into the hole and turn. You really have to push. If you just lightly try to turn it, it's not going to go anywhere. Push it into the hole and turn. Just like that. Once it's nice and straight, you're good to go. Alright, so once that's done, next step. This step's not required, but it's a great idea in my opinion. If you want to do it, you can. If you don't, it's no big deal, but I'm going to show it to you anyway. So these two little straws that you were supplied with earlier, I like to call them axle sleeves. What they act as is basically like a small, they try to eliminate friction, because there will be friction between the axles and the wood or the inside of your axle holes that you drilled earlier on your piece of wood. So we'll have to cut these down to length and perfect size if you want to, and slide them in. So the easiest way to go about this, you'll need a pair of scissors, by the way. Hold one end up against the edge of the piece of wood. The other end, put your thumbnail right next to it, and move your thumbnail just a little bit in. You want it to be slightly smaller than the width of the car, not over or exactly the same, just slightly smaller. Take the scissors and try to cut near the deepmost portion of the V of the scissors. Squeeze it. Be careful. These little guys, they like to go flying, so make sure you pay attention to where they go. So we got one done for the front. Repeat the process, one for the rear. Just like that. Any of these scrap pieces that are left over, we don't really need them, so please throw them in the trash can. Don't leave them on the floor or the table. Clean them up. Put them where they go. All right, next step. Sometimes putting these axle sleeves into the holes is a little bit difficult. So one quick trick that I've learned along the way and has made things a lot easier is if you take the scratch awl, stick it into your axle hole, make sure your hand's not on either side or the other side so you stab it by accident. Push in and turn. It just makes the outside of it a little bit bigger and kind of clears that paint that you might have gotten inside accidentally out. Just like that. Do the front, the rear, both left and right. Just like that. And after that, pretty simple and straightforward. It should be big enough that you slide the axle sleeve right in. And it's pretty much just like that. Good. So I don't see any showing on either side. That means I did everything perfectly and correctly every single time. Next step would be the axles. We have to cut them down to size. And before we cut them down, just one quick trick that I like to show you. If you want your car to go a little bit faster than the others, this is kind of like a little speed secret from Mr. Nicholas. These guys, when they come from the factory, they're kind of in like a little bit of a coating. If you feel them, they're a little bit sticky, which basically just prevents them from rusting. That's great and all, but for our purposes, they create friction, which isn't exactly the best thing to be inside of our car. So in order to kind of get these things a little bit smoother, the easiest way to go about that is we're going to use this right here, which is known as steel wool. It's literally a bunch of little teeny tiny steel fibers in like a wool form. And I have a bunch of it in my metalworking cabinet on the bottom left. Take it and go back and forth, shine this axle up. You can pinch it between your fingers and just go back and forth, squeeze, and try and get this thing all smoothed out. There will be a huge difference from when you did it, like between the one you did and the one that you didn't. And this does make a big difference. So spend a decent amount of time on this, get it nice and smooth out. Just like that. Perfect. Cool. That's feeling great. I love it. Switch over, do the other side. The same exact process. Want to get rid of that film, that coating that was on it to help protect it from rust. We don't really have to worry about it rusting, of course, for our cases. So back and forth, stand it away, just like you see here. Move it back and forth, rotate it every now and then. Okay, so these are pretty much all set and ready to go. So, next thing we have to do is mark the axles out to size and perfect length. Since we have a front and a rear, our wheels are a little bit different, so we have a couple of different sizes we have to work with for the front and rear axles. For the front axles, I've gone through all kinds of different measurements, and the best possible measurement that you were looking for the front is 1 3/8 inches. So 1 3/8 of an inch. If you mark it out directly on 1 3/8, then, excuse me, it's going to come out perfect every single time, and you won't have to worry about your axle length for your front being too short or too long. So find the ruler that has 1/8 on it, line it up at the very end, just like that, hold it still. And we need our trusty old Sharpie. Mark out 1 3/8 inches with the Sharpie. Usually what I like to do is the side that I'm keeping stays as is. The side that I don't want anymore, I'll kind of scribble over it with the Sharpie just a little bit. So you can see like right there. So that's the side that I know I don't want. That way when I cut it off, I don't get confused. So after that one's marked out, the next one we have to mark out is the rear axle. The rear axle is just slightly bigger by 1/8, which makes it 1.5 inches. So 1.5 inches. That's the magic number for the rear. So put it on top of the ruler, repeat the process one more time, except this time we're marking it out at 1.5 inches. Once it's at 1.5 inches, like I said, repeat that process, kind of scribble out that side that you don't want to keep, just like that, and set it off to the side. Alright, then you're ready pretty much for the next step, which is cutting these things out to size. So, here we go. So next thing we're going to do, after we have all of our axles laid out to the proper length, is cut them down to size. So first thing you want to do is take it, and the side that you kind of marked out with Sharpie and scribbled on, you want to open up the vise, place it inside, and the mark that you marked out that you want to cut directly on, put that right at the end of the vise here. Clamp it down nice and tight so it doesn't go anywhere. Okay? And that's important. Then we're going to take this guy right here, which is known as the hacksaw. It's in the metalworking cabinet on the left of the room, the left cabinet. It's meant for cutting metal. So the metalworking cabinet and the hacksaw itself, the reason why we use it is because it has a bunch of teeny tiny teeth, and for when you're cutting metal you need tinier teeth, or else if you use bigger teeth from like a woodworking saw, it won't exactly work correctly. So put it directly on top of the axle that we need to cut, right up against the vise as a guide, and slowly start to go back and forth to get that groove all worked in. After it's worked in, use the whole length of the saw. Don't push down too hard. Let the weight of the saw do its work and go through and cut the rest of it off. Usually what I like to do is just to help support it, and so the piece that I'm cutting off doesn't fall, hold on to the axle. Cut the whole way through until you get your axle cut to size, just like that. Just a word of caution, the end of the tip of the axle where you cut is hot because you had two surfaces rubbing up against each other, which is called friction. And obviously, when there's friction, friction generates heat. So be careful, be warned about that. The scrap piece that we have left over, I have a recyclable little green cup here. Move that into size, or into the frame so you can see it. Throw that in there. Make sure you keep the one that doesn't have any marks on it. You want to keep that, don't get lost. Then repeat the same process with the other axle. Clamp it in place and cut through it, just like before. Perfect. Exactly what I want. So scrap piece, take it out, throw it in the recyclable cup, put it off to the side. All right, so we're pretty much almost there. We just need to finally assemble everything together, and we're just about on the home stretch. So the next few steps I'm going to show you how to assemble everything together, get this thing ready to roll. For putting everything together, you're going to need a few tools here. You're going to need one of these hammers here, a ball peen hammer, the ones with kind of like a ball around it end on the one side. You're going to need your axles, the front and rear that you cut, and you're also going to need 4 wheels, 4 washers, and the car itself. Might also be handy just to have a ruler just in case. So first thing we need to do, we have to find out exactly how long these axles were. So they'll be close in size, but they're obviously different the longer you go in the rear. So look at it, the longest one goes with the rear axles. So the rear axles are these larger ones here, off to the side. And the shorter one goes with the small wheels, which are the front. Just as a disclaimer, these wheels, when they come from the factory, they kind of have edges or ribs on them. If you want to take like sandpaper and file that off or sand it down those ribs, it'll make it a little bit cleaner or smoother running when your car goes down the track. So first, we're going to take our rear wheel and the rear axle, the one that's longer, put it inside the hole, just like that. Pinch it between your fingers, take the hammer, lightly tap on it, get it into place. Until it bottoms out, you'll feel it won't be able to go through any further. Do the same with the front, but obviously with the front axle and the front wheel. Tap it into place. Perfect. Then the next step, put 1 washer on either axle, right over the top. Just like that. Perfect. So the next step, we're going to do I think we'll do the front first. Front wheels, slide it through one side so it can pop out the other side. What I'm doing here is I'm putting my finger over the axle sleeve, so in case you have one in there, it doesn't pop out by accident. Pops through the other side. Take the washer, slide it over top. Then we need to take the other front wheel, put it over top as well, like so. Perfect. Tap it in place. So you feel it bottom out, just like that. And there should be a little bit of play back and forth, which is perfectly fine. You don't want it to be super tight or too far away that it's really extended out there. If it wobbles a little bit, that's good. That's perfectly fine. Next step, the rear of the car, same exact process. Feed it through, just like that. Take a washer on the other side, put it over top. Take the other wheel, feed this over top as well. This one's a little bit different. Instead of using the flat side of the hammer, we're going to use this little rounded part because it fits inside and gets the top of the part of the wheel a little bit better. If you use the top or the flat side, you could possibly snap one of these little spokes off. So turn it around, tap on it. It's a little bit tricky, but once you get started, it works pretty good. And sometimes they might go a little bit too far, so you have to wiggle them out just a little bit until they spin freely, just like that. And once we're done, that's pretty much all it. That's all you have to do. So just as a quick tip, once you're completely finished, you might want to go through what I call the break-in process, which is basically getting the axles and the axle sleeves or the inside of the car all grooved together and smoothed out. So you might have to just take the car, and it sounds pretty silly, but run it back and forth. Just run it back and forth for a few minutes. You can talk to your friends, just run it back and forth. It's getting everything smoothed out. The smoother that it is inside those axle holes or axle sleeves, the less friction there is, and obviously the faster your car will go. So when you're completely done, you should have free spinning wheels, just like that right there. Oh, they're pretty good. Front and rear. If they seem like they're bent a little bit, you can always take them and tweak them with your fingers a little bit. Don't push too hard or else you might accidentally snap the spokes. But once you're completely done, this is exactly what you should have. So we have the axles and wheels with all the washers and all that jazz, and the front and rear eyelet. So congratulations. Looks great.